Welcome to Upside Down Mirror, one woman's true story of a twin flame journey, a reflection of true love, true hate, and everything between, where everything and nothing matters at the same time. Paradigms shatter as mirrors of shadows cut through indestructible layers, testing the sands of time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Upside Down Mirror. If you remember, in episode 7, I had gotten pregnant with Sean's baby, still contemplating whether or not to raise it with Gabe, and still going back and forth between the two relationships. At this point, the baby had had 2 miraculous healings by Dr. Richard Bartlett, one that kept me from having a miscarriage, and 2, her head went to its full size again, where she was able to be born completely healthy. Now that I look back on it, I'm going to state the obvious, and that is there was definitely some dark energy at play that wanted my baby not there, and if she were to come, didn't want her fully functioning in the way a healthy baby can. However, I didn't see it at the time. I'm still thinking that everything is just coincidence and wondering why I'm the one going through this. So I had recorded Gabe talking to these alien reptilian voices downstairs. You know, when you actually have something this paranormal go on, you question your sanity. I woke up one day and realized it's not okay that Gabe is living with me while he's talking to these dark reptilian energies. I'm pregnant with this divine child. I have my other children in the house, which are divine. I have to get him out. I knew he was going to throw a fit. I knew it would be a big ordeal. We worked together in the practice. I was going through a lot of audits that he had caused, but I just didn't care. So I asked him to leave, and of course he wouldn't. And I told him, I'm scared. I have these recordings of you. I don't know who you're talking to. They're scary, and I really need you to leave. He wouldn't. He refused to leave no matter what I said. This man was not leaving my home. So I had to take the recordings to the police, and once they heard them, they actually removed him from my house. He went to live in a hotel. However, during that time, they said he is going to still be able to go to work because you can't just fire him. You know, we can take him out of your house, but we're not taking him out of your work. So that went on for a couple months. At this point, I was, almost getting ready to deliver. During this time, after I kicked Gabe out of the house, Sean had stepped forward and said, okay, do you want to do this? Do you want to make this work? You and I, we can make this work. I can come, I can live with you. I'll quit my job, find another job, help you with the baby. I felt so torn. Sean was a man that I looked at and fell in love with, love at first sight. But at this point, I was just questioning everything. I didn't want to be with a man who just wanted to be with me because we had a child together and thought it was the right thing to do. So I actually said yes, and then he made all the arrangements to come, and I just got so scared, and I'm not going to lie, part of me was still thinking about Gabe. I was under basically a spell. I can look back and say I was 100% under some sort of spell, and I still thought maybe there's a chance that Gabe is going to come back. Maybe he's going to get better. If I have Sean in the house, then that's not going to happen. I wasn't sure how Sean felt about me. He didn't come right out and say, I'm in love with you. It all seemed like maybe it was because of the child, and I didn't want that. So I told him, no, I don't think you can come. He was very, very upset because he had just quit his job and quit his bands and prepared to come and move with me, packed up his house, and then I said no. I was upset as well. I felt so horrible, but I just remember feeling like I can't do it when I'm this unsure. I just can't do it. I tried to force myself to do it, but I couldn't. So I was actually shocked when he still wanted to come for the birth of the baby, because at this point, the baby was going to be born in a few weeks. To my surprise, I am served with court papers from Gabe. You know, he is questioning the restraining order, questioning the fact that he can't come live in his home, he said, and in there, he is questioning the paternity of the baby. There was no physical, biological way that that was his baby. So that was really bizarre to me, but I ended up having to go to court. The judge stood by me and said, no, you're not allowed in the home. You can still remain at work. And then he looked at me with the whole paternal, I'm standing there extremely pregnant at this time, probably almost ready to give birth of a couple weeks. And he's saying, that's my child. Gabe is saying, that's my child. And I'm like, actually, it's not. Biologically, this is not his child. We were not intimate. There is no way that this can be his child. The judge looked perplexed, like he had never been through a situation where someone's trying to say that the child is theirs, even though they weren't intimate with the person. So that didn't last too long. But what I did see was this overwhelming need for Gabe to be the father of that child. That's when I was like, there's more to it. And it took me this long to realize it, but there's more to it than him just wanting to be the father. There's something about this child. That was a doubt in my mind. I wasn't 100% sold on it, but it came across my mind for the first time. So I'm coming towards the end of my pregnancy. We have a date scheduled for July 6th of 2017 for me to become induced and to have this beautiful child. I was still completely shocked that Sean wanted to be there, but he wanted to be there during the pregnancy, during the labor. He drove down, was there by my side when I was giving birth to the baby, held my hand. It was just a beautiful moment. She was absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous when she was born. He immediately took his shirt off and they did bonding together. She did bonding with me. He stayed for about 2 weeks. He took some time off of work because he had gotten another job by then. He took some time off of work and stayed for 2 weeks to help me raise the child. We were watching our favorite shows together. We were living as though we would live if we were a couple. He was still very affectionate to me. We weren't intimate because I couldn't be, but he was still lying in the bed next to me. And I remember at the end of the 2 weeks when he had to leave, I started to feel like I was in love with him again. But for some reason, that scared me tremendously. When I felt that love for him, there was some sort of energy that did not want that. I remember feeling this huge block, like, okay, now I can never see him again. So unfortunately, I did start to go back and see Gabe. I started to bring the baby to see Gabe, introducing them two together. And Sean would come down as much as he could to see the baby at a hotel, while I would bring Willow, is her name. I would bring Willow to the hotel and he would bond with her, swim with her. He was an amazing father, 100% trying as hard as he can. We'd bring his dad down with him. It was extremely sweet. He would go home. I would continue my work life. And it just seemed like the audit kept getting worse and worse and worse. Things were happening that I didn't quite understand why they were happening, because everything was being so secretive at that point, that I just remember thinking, okay, something is going to happen here, because this audit is so secretive and I don't know why the Attorney General's office is keeping it so secretive. We lived about almost a year of Willow's life in this situation where I actually ended up inviting Gabe back into the house. I felt like I loved him so much. I felt like the dark energies were gone and that maybe he could come back now that the baby was born and we could be a family. And of course, he sat down and looked at me and said that's what he wanted. But then he said, I'm just scared with her father being in the picture because maybe I'll fall in love with this child and then he'll come and take her and that would just destroy me. So I stupidly actually thought to myself, okay, I'm going to make sure that Gabe gets to spend time with her, that she knows Gabe as well. This happened to, like I said, till she was about a year old. And then I started to kind of wake up a little bit. Like, once again, those doubts, what am I doing? What is happening here would start to cross my mind. And then I had a really good friend invite me to Mount Shasta. And I thought, I could really use this break. I'll take Willow to her father, her biological father, and he can watch her while I go to Mount Shasta. This was a friend I had in Hollywood. She's very spiritual. It's like she knew that I needed to talk to her. While in Mount Shasta, she's talking to me, asking me what's going on, and I'm explaining the whole entire situation. And then she said, do you have those recordings of Gabe talking to those voices? And I said, yes. She goes, there is a guy named Simon Parks in England that's very popular that deals with these reptilian gray energies. I want you to reach out to him. She said he normally has a 3-month waiting list, but if you send him that information and he listens to it, he may get you in sooner. So I emailed him, sent the recordings. Not even 3 hours later, I received an email back from his secretary wanting to have an emergency situation with me. She wanted to do it that night, but I was sleeping when I got the email, and then woke up the next morning and emailed her. So the actual session wasn't allowed to be for like another week. Meanwhile, there was a court date that had been scheduled by the Attorney General's office because of all these audits. I really didn't know what to expect other than I was going to a preliminary meeting with my lawyer and the Attorney General's office, but I wasn't overly concerned. Anyways, I got to Baltimore, went to a hotel, and had my call with Simon Parks. Willow was still with her biological father at the time. Gabe was staying at my house, and, I'm doing this alone. Simon Parks immediately says, Rebecca, show me a picture of this guy, Gabe. And I did. And he was like, he is practicing dark magic, is what he called it. Dark magic. He is not healthy for you. Basically, he was telling me that Gabe has given his soul up to these reptilian energies for some sort of purpose. And these reptilian energies had been attacking him for quite some time, which is why his skin turned leather. There was probably a time in his life where he did fall in love with me, but if he fell in love with me is when he would have got in trouble because he had a mission to accomplish with me, and love was not part of that mission. And he said, you need to stay away from him. You're not going to help him. He said, I'm telling you, you need to stay away from him. It is a matter of life or death. You have to get away from this man. And he said that Willow was extremely gifted and that I would start seeing her major abilities by the time she hit 5, that she needed to be protected. I left there feeling like, oh my gosh, what have I done? It was just like the whole world was spinning around me. Went straight to court right after that. Found out that they were going to press charges against me for not having the telemedicine program licensed in the way it needed to, which would have made every single service that we rendered be questioned because it wasn't licensed. So even though the people got treatment and they got medicine, it would still be counted as fraud because we didn't have the right licensure. Gabe was in charge of that licensure. Furthermore, there was questionable billing and medication errors for the doctor's program that he was overseeing. His name was not documented at all. Everything was under my name. It came as such a slap in the face. There wasn't much I could do. Everything on paper was me, signed by me, because he would bring paperwork and have me sign it. My lawyer obviously knew the situation, so he did not think that I was going to get in trouble because he thought he could explain away the whole situation with as much evidence as I had, as many employees as I had at my practice. They all knew everybody's roles. So he didn't think it would be a problem with making a very clear picture as to what happened during this situation. For some reason during that time, I didn't want Gabe to get in trouble either. I didn't really feel okay with bringing his name in it and getting him into a lot of trouble, because I always felt like he needed to be taken care of, and his mental health was always questionable since the psychotic break. So it's not even like I wanted this man to get in trouble. I just wanted the whole situation to go away. I get home, I'm bringing this to Gabe's attention, and he didn't care that he got me in this much trouble, didn't care that I had to give $50,000 to a lawyer. He really was just still focused on himself, and he just kept looking at me saying, "You're not firing me from my job. You're not firing me from my job. This is my job. I'm keeping it. This is what I do. This is how I make my money." And I said, "You potentially have probably just got me into a lot of trouble. They're actually taking me to court for this." And I told him, "I'm going to be explaining what happened. I don't want to get you in trouble, but I'm going to be explaining what happened." And he's like, "Do what you have to do. You're not firing me from my job." He did not care at all the stress I was under. I went back, I brought Willow home, and this time in my life, with going through the audit, with having him in my home, all the darkness in my home, I actually stopped in my tracks and said, something has to give. Something has to change. My guardian parents, I stopped listening to them a long time ago. I didn't listen to them since the time they told me that Sean was supposed to be the father. I did impregnate myself with Sean's baby, but after that, there was still very much the thought that Gabe was going to be a father figure to her and raise her as his own. The guardian parents would try to talk to me. I wouldn't listen to them. So that's a higher aspect of myself trying to talk to me, trying to get me out of the situation in a healthy way. I would not listen. Like I said, I felt like there was some sort of spell over me or something. The power that Gabe had over me was something I've never felt before. The inability to permanently get away from this man was huge. I just couldn't permanently get away from him. I didn't know what it was going to take for me to get away from him. I just know that something had to change. I remember saying, something has to change. I'm miserable. I'm not really even in love. I need to get out of this situation. He wouldn't leave my house. Here I had Sean trying to be this good man, this good father, reaching out to me. And to be honest with you, he was putting up with quite a bit. Sean and I's baby, Willow, was born with a very interesting birthmark on her forehead that I'm certain was a result of those downloads that were given to her through Dr. Richard Bartlett, very high frequency downloads. The birthmark would activate when she would become emotional or cry, or if she was in water, it would start to turn purple and her head would start pulsating, her forehead would start pulsating. And my daughter at the time, my other daughter, who was 11 when Willow was born, used to say, "Mom, I'm not watching her when her forehead does that," because it was so different. Well, I had given her a shower I had given her a bath and put her on the bed, wrapped her in a green towel. She was 2 months old when this happened, and walked out to get her bottle. This was a king-size bed. There's no way that baby was moving. She couldn't move. She couldn't roll over. She couldn't scoot. I come back from making her bottle, and the green towel is unwrapped, and she's lying on the ground doing tummy time But she's crying as though she was irritated because when babies are 2 months old, they don't like to do tummy time. And that's how she was crying. Like, that was just irritating her that she was doing tummy time. I was standing in my tracks being like, what happened? How did my baby get from the bed to the floor? There was no one else there in the room to do it. And I kind of just stared at her in disbelief because I didn't know what happened. I took her to the doctors because I was being overcautious, and he said, no, she absolutely did not fall off the bed. And he kind of grinned at me. He probably just thought I was tired or half crazy. And he said, maybe she'll tell you what really happened when she's about 16 years old. And then I left, and I always remember that incident because I'm pretty sure that she actually levitated off the bed. I remember telling Sean that, and he just kind of laughed. But, he said, I believe you. I believe it happened. He said, it's just unusual. But I remember thinking how supportive he was, even at a really early age with Willow, about her abilities. I had some interesting things happen to me through my journey with Willow that I'm now just putting together. I had a healer from Rhode Island call me out of the blue. And she said she psychically knew I was pregnant. And this is when I was pregnant and almost ready to give birth with Willow. And she became extremely interested in me, offering me a large amount of money to go and help her heal. And I remember knowing that there's no way that she just wants me to go and help her with her practice and pay me this much money. I didn't understand what was going on, really, until I started seeing some of the things unfold with Willow. After Willow was born, I had had another person that took interest in me when I was pregnant that used to travel with me to the seminars and became very interested in my pregnancy, and even trying to advocate against Sean, telling me that Sean had dark energy and she didn't think he would be a good father. But I knew better. I mean, there was no question that he would be a good father, but I just didn't understand why she was so against him. Well, one time after the baby was born, I was supposed to meet her for a business meeting. And I had a sitter watch the baby while I was driving to the business meeting, which was 40 minutes away. She calls me and she says, is Willow with you? And I said, no, she's not. And she canceled the business meeting. She didn't want to see me unless Willow was there. So those are some unusual circumstances that happened where I feel like the reason that these people wanted to spend time with me is because of Willow. And then I started to see this a little bit differently whenever Gabe was becoming really obsessed with being an influence in her life, because he just didn't seem like he would be a good father naturally. He didn't seem like he connected that well to human beings even, and I couldn't figure out why he wanted to be a father for Willow. I thought it was because he had such undying love for me and he wanted this family. But now I'm starting to see things a little differently as I'm beginning to see that she's a little different herself. So now I'm really stuck because I'm in this situation where I have Sean reaching out to me, wanting to be the father that he can be, being very nice to me. I was still uncertain about his feelings for me and mine for him. I have Gabe, who is not planning to leave the house at all because I invited him back in after the restraining order. And once again, that was hard to get him out in the first place. And now they're not even going to take me seriously because I'm just one of those girls who puts a restraining order against a guy, drops it, and then invites him back in. So I remember just feeling completely stuck. Sean seeing her at a hotel when he came up, me taking her to see him and his family, but never a situation where we're all together. I wasn't even in an emotional, spiritual, or mental place to be able to deal with having a relationship with him at that time anyways. So everything came to a head a few weeks later in October of 2018. I was actually doing very well at my spiritual practice during this time. It was taking off. I remember thinking if there was an opportunity where I could completely get out of the mental health, the primary care, it would be now because I'm doing so well with my spiritual practice. But once again, I didn't want to disappoint or hurt my family, the people working for me, and Gabe as well, even though I went through all of those audits completely because of the way he had done the paperwork and oversaw the medical program, which was all under my name. Now I have the prosecuting attorney's office wanting to press charges against me, but I had a very good lawyer who was saying that he was going to be able to clear things up. So we had a court case coming, and he was telling me not to worry about it. Don't worry. You're just going to plead guilty to the paperwork being wrong. You're going to plead guilty to some of the medical errors being wrong. But once I explained the situation to them, he said, everything's going to be just fine. So I was nervous. It was on my mind constantly. I was trying to watch Willow deal with the whole Gabe situation, protect Sean from everything that was basically going on around me because he was so concerned for his daughter. And I wanted to make sure that I loved Willow in the way that she needed to. You know, through all this, I did manage to be a good parent, very protective over her. And then the court case came. This is when everything came to a head. This is when my life changed dramatically. This is when my guardian parents stepped in and took over. This is when they said, enough is enough. We're going to change your life one way or another. If you're not going to communicate with your higher self, then we'll do the communication for you. And we'll talk about that in the next podcast.